to the Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting for March 23rd, 2022. This is my first in-person meeting that I'm chairing, so if I forget to do stuff, I'm sure Paul will pipe in and let me know. He's looking away. All right, so let's go up here. So we didn't have training. So we'll start with approval of last meeting's minutes. So I'll be looking for a motion.
So move we approve the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Who was that?
Amy Burrows.
Amy, okay. Thank you. I need to put my glasses on so I can see. It's like I don't need it for close-up, but I do. All right, I have a motion from Maureen and a second from Amy. Let's go ahead and take a vote. Adrian?
Abstain.
Amy? Yes. John?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. That motion passes. Moving on to a report of the chair. I don't really have anything this meeting. Maureen, Vice Chair?
I have nothing.
Report of the director.
Thank you. Just wanted to start with a reminder for people to, I think everyone's already got it, but remember to turn your microphones on and off when you speak. And these work better, they pick up better sound if the closer it is to your face. That probably goes for anybody who comes up to the table to speak as well, to make sure everybody can hear you. I wanted to give an update on a couple of things that were in front of the City Council yesterday. So the first kind of big thing was, you'll remember in January, the Planning Commission heard a proposal regarding homeless resource centers. Last night, the Planning Commission did adopt an ordinance that City Council, thank you, that removes, at least for the time being, homeless resource centers from the land use tables while we're working on updating the regulations and a process to do that. However, one of the things that they did do is that they also adopted, as part of that ordinance, a provision that adds the rules back in if the city doesn't have something in place by a certain time. It was, I don't know where the final date landed, but it was sometime in next calendar year. So that was intended to address not just the Planning Commission's concerns that were raised, but the concerns raised by service providers. And to give you an update on that, we have internally over the last several months, we've been trying to understand, as the planning division, understand the impacts that a homeless resource center has on city resources so that we can update regulations, and those types of impacts can be considered when we look at where homeless resource centers may be allowed in the future. We'll be doing similar exercises with the service providers and through our various public engagement activities. We hope to be able to do that part through the months of April and May, and be back in June with an update for the Planning Commission, and then go from there. So we do want to act as quickly as we can with that. The City Council also had a briefing on 2 zoning changes. One was, if you remember back to last year, the proposal to increase the height for stealth towers in the public land zoning district. The Planning Commission forwarded a negative recommendation on that. The public hearing for that will be in a few weeks. I'm not exactly sure of that date with the City Council. And then they also heard and had a briefing on the proposed rezone of the Western Garden site just west of Trolley Square on 600 East. Something that may be of interest is that on April 5th, this is a tentative date, but I think it's tentative only because the schedule hasn't been published, but the City Council will be having a fairly comprehensive briefing from our department, Community and Neighborhoods, on all of the various proposals that are in front of the council regarding housing. So that may be something that is of interest, and we'll provide an update after that. And then we hope to be able to, in the coming months, update with the commission review and update the policies and procedures so that we can address any potential future hybrid or virtual meetings. Right now, the Planning Commission policies and procedures don't allow someone to participate remotely unless the chair makes a declaration as that it's unsafe. And as we're moving out of that phase, we need to update. We still can do those things, but we need to update our policies and procedures under state law. So we'll be having something on an agenda to discuss that coming up. And that's all I
Will
have.
you include provisions in that to vote
To vote?
remotely when we have
Yes.
voting come up?
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
a possibility.
Yes.
Is that it? Okay. All right, so right before we move into the agenda, if you are here and you want to speak on an item, there's cards right outside the door. If you want to fill them out, you can then pass them on to John and they'll make it up to me. That just helps us keep things organized. When you're called on to speak for whatever issue you want, that podium, I guess, is where you'll be speaking. The microphone is on, so you'll make your way over there. Okay, let's move on to our first public hearing item, which is the ADU conditional use at approximately 991 South, 1000 East. This is case number PLN PCM 2021-01285, and our planner tonight for this is Diana.
Hi, thank you, and nice to see everybody in person. This is a conditional use application for an accessory dwelling use.
Can I ask you, Diane, to just really lean into that microphone?
not hear me?
It is
I'm
not
sorry.
just me, it's the people in the back who also cannot
Hey.
hear.
Yeah, this is
Really
the
close.
blessing of relearning meetings in
How
person.
to do it in person.
We have a lot of white noise from the fan behind us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So everybody
Okay.
needs to really speak up.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. This is a conditional use application for an accessory dwelling use, ADU, at 991 South 10th East. Just so you can locate this in your head, it is southeast of the 9th and 9th business area in that neighborhood. The request is for an accessory dwelling unit. This is part of a new construction to the property, so that the property owners will be taking down the existing house and the existing detached garage in the rear and putting up new. So a new home, which is not part of this application, and which is what the part that is part of this application is the detached garage will now have an accessory dwelling unit on top. So the size of the proposed footprint of the entire accessory dwelling building will be 650 square feet. So they meet that. The accessory dwelling on top on the second floor will be 450 square feet. The proposed height of the building will be 22.5 feet. The main house is being proposed at 26.5, so they meet that. They're under 4 feet. The ground floor garage will be 4 feet from the property lines to the north and to the south, and the ADU will be bumped in 10 feet from the north and the south. And both the garage and the ADU will be 4 feet from the alley that is to the east. There will be a 60 square foot balcony off the east side of the ADU, which is allowed. They're allowed up to 80 square feet. It will overhang, but this is allowed since it abuts to the alley. This is a picture of the existing house on the left and the existing detached garage on the top right. I just wanted to put this picture in on the bottom right. This is the alley looking from the north to the south. There was a little bit of a talk from the East Liberty Park Community Organization about the alley and the proposal. It was in the, getting some feedback, I think. No? Okay. It was in the extra folder in the SharePoint. The community organization is granting approval, but they did have some remarks to the Planning Commission regarding this situation where an ADU is put on an alleyway. This is the site plan on the left side of of the screen. The elevation looking to the garage and the ADU from the house is on the top right, and then the view from the alley will be on the bottom right. This, I put this in just so that you can see the balcony, the overhang that the balcony has. It's not considerable. It will be just right over the drive approach from the alley to the garage. The applicant last week did submit some new changes to the materials that will be used on the property, and they did take out one window, but it meets the standards and staff is okay with them, so. And they will show that in their PDF that they have. Staff is recommending approval of the application of the ADU with next steps of conditions and requirements that the applicant will have to comply with.
Okay, commissioners have any questions for Diana at this time?
I do. I just have one question, which is that if, what if the main dwelling is not torn down? What would happen to the ADU application? Would it still be do we need to put a condition on this ADU that the main dwelling is rebuilt as proposed?
So no, if they left the existing house, which I cannot imagine that they would, it would still meet the setback requirements. The height requirement would be an issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That, I don't, offhand, I don't know the height of the existing, but I'm assuming it may be 25, 26. We could ask the applicant on that.
Okay.
That would be where the issue becomes, is the
Yes.
height.
Yes, I know. That I know it's the height. So I'm just wondering whether that should be a condition of this approval, that the existing dwelling is rebuilt at a height higher
And
than-
not knowing offhand what the existing is, I mean, if it was 26 feet, it would still be okay. And that's what I'm assuming it is. It does sit high on grade, the existing house, but again, I don't know the measurement offhand. We'd have to ask.
Let me do some research, and when we get back to the discussion after the public hearing, we can answer that.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, it looks like we have an applicant of Margie Mayer and Dave Brock.
It's actually Margie Marr. I know, same here.
Thank you.
I
for that
believe
correction.
both of them are going to come up. They have a PDF, but I'm not sure that they're going to both
Okay,
present.
Margie and Dave, you're here. If you want to take a seat at the table next to Diana. she
I
can-
do. Yeah, let me just switch over.
So I will have you, when I'm done, introduce yourselves for the record, and then you'll have up to 10 minutes. You don't feel like you have to take that, but I'll time you for that. And then if Diana are you working on a presentation for them?
This is it.
Okay.
Yes.
At the end of your presentation, I'll open it up if commissioners have any questions for you at that time. Okay. But the floor is yours. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Margie Marr.
And I'm Dave Brock.
So we included a PDF with just some updated images of the ADU. So this is the alleyway. If you're standing at the alley, this is kind of the elevation you would see. So we just added an awning, and like Diana said, we just had some updates to materials. But for the overall intent for this ADU was to create a cohesive design for both the new house and the ADU, so it all kind of feels like it matches and fits well together. But we also just wanted to create like an attractive element to this alleyway to kind of enliven it a bit. And with that, we also aim to keep the ADU as compact as possible and keeping it shorter than the new house that would be designed next to it. You can flip to the next. So this is also from the alleyway, but just kind of a more corner view looking northwest. So you can see the new house in the background as well. yeah, where Diana's pointing. And then this would be a view from within the site, looking at the southwest corner. So you can see the entrance to the garage on the lower level, and then the ADU above. And again, with the house to your right, or to your left.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably just happy to take questions. And in fact, I could address Brenda's question kind of on an informal basis. I think the house that's there is not 22 feet. It's probably more like 12 to 14.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what would happen if we tried to do that, which is we'd go submit for a building permit. The zoning people in the building department would see that there's no demo permit and there's no new house, and they would compare it to the approved petition, and they wouldn't pass it. I think they'd probably call Diana and kind of halt the whole process. So obviously that's not going to happen in this case, but of course you never know. But the existing house is one story.
Okay, Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, you guys just hang tight. I'll open it up for a public comment period, and then once I close it, we'll bring it back to the commission, and there may be further questions. So we will open the public comment period for this agenda item. I do not have a card, but if anybody wishes to speak, now is your time on this one. Okay, oh, I do see someone. Oh, he's leaving, so he's not speaking. Okay, I was all anticipating. So I seen, if you wish to speak, please go up to the lectern there and state your full name for the record, and then you will have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Neil Ellis, and so I live just would be on the south side of this house that's going in. My concern is the height. For one, I believe the pitch on my house is like 22, and if you're saying it's 26,
Oh, the new one, yes.
is
Sorry,
I mean, how is that supposed to be in unison with kind of the rest of the neighborhood?
So any questions you have, I'll write down, and we'll answer them after you're done.
I'm sorry?
Any questions you have, I'll write down, and I'll answer them once you're finished.
Okay, and then also the plans for the ADU, is it required that who's ever the owner of the main house, are they required to live in that residence? And will it be a family member living there, or is it just a Airbnb? Some of them questions is what I have.
Okay, was that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who wishes to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment period. I will let you know that in ordinance, an ADU requires the owner of the house to occupy either the principal residence or the ADU, so they have to occupy one of them. The ordinance does not regulate like who they may rent to live there, but there is an ordinance in Salt Lake City that restricts Airbnbs. If anybody ever feels a resident is being operated as an Airbnb, they would call civil enforcement within Salt Lake City, and that would be their job to go regulate that. Diana, do you want to please address the question about height and what is allowed by right for a principal structure and then the ADU?
Right, I actually don't know what the allowable height is. I'm gonna have to defer to management for that.
The principal building in this zone can be built up to 28 feet if it's a pitched roof, and that's measured to the highest point of the pitched roof, or 23 feet if it's flat, or 20 feet if it's flat, sorry, if it's a flat roof structure. And by our ordinance, an ADU is not allowed to be taller than the principal structure. They can go up to 17 feet, and then they can increase that if there's an increase in step back up to a certain height.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Nick, can you
I'm
repeat that for
sorry.
him?
Yep, I'm guilty of my own advice. So, the principal building height in this zone is 28 feet, and that's measured to the point of the roof, if it's a pitched roof. If it's a flat roof, it's 20 feet, and that's measured to basically the flat part of the roof. An ADU is allowed, there's a regulation that says it cannot be taller than the principal house. And if they meet the minimum setbacks, then that height can be 17 feet, provided the house is 17 feet or taller. And then that height can increase, I believe it's up to 23 feet for every additional foot of increased setback from a property line. So if it's further away, it can be a little bit taller than if it's at the minimum height for, or minimum setback for a 2-story ADU. It's from a property line. If there's an alley that separates two properties, then that setback can actually be reduced because the alley counts as part of that reduction.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I'll bring it back to you for any discussion or if you have other questions for staff or the applicant.
I would like to say that when we say there's a restriction, it can't be an Airbnb, that means that the ADU or the main house can be rented, but not for less than a period of 30 days.
Correct.
So it has to be 30 days. You're not changing tenants every week. And also the requirement that the home or the ADU has to be occupied by the homeowner, that's like forever. That's part of the title. So if they sell this house to someone else, then that person has to live in the ADU or in the building. So that prevents like a hotel from being built in your neighborhood, which hopefully helps you feel better. I have a real quick question. Is the garage, will it have the same setback in the alley that the current garage has? Like you can see from the existing picture, they all kind of line up in the alley there. Will it be like that?
I'm assuming it's going to be very close. Let me go back to that slide. You can see this fence line, the vinyl fence where it meets that wood fence. That's about 4 feet. And so I'm going to assume that it is about the same with the applicant saying yes too. Because I've been out there several times, and I would say that that's about 4 or 5 feet from the garage door to that wood fence. And it's a 4-foot setback to the alley, the east property line. So I would.
Yeah, there's actually the transportation has reviewed it, and that there's a standard that you have to meet,
Yep.
which was probably the same when they built that garage for turning radius.
For the drive approach.
That we had to meet as well. It's going to be within a foot.
Hey, Nick, did you happen to find an answer for Brenda's question earlier?
Yeah, and so what we do think a condition is probably warranted because you couldn't approve the proposed height based on the existing house that's there. And so in that case, you couldn't, you'd have to deny the ADU application. So you can and probably should put a condition on this that says that the building permit for the ADU as proposed cannot be issued unless it is issued with an associated building permit to increase the height of the principal building, subject to the principal building meeting all of the zoning stuff. You don't need to add that part, but that would be something that would have to happen as well, because you don't have the authority to reduce setbacks or change the height allowed of the principal building.
Okay, Brenda, do you want to take a stab at that motion?
I will take a stab, although I think Nick said it very well, so. All right. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I would move that the Planning Commission approve the accessory dwelling unit ADU conditional use application PLN PCM 2021-01285 with the addition of the following condition: that the ADU cannot be permitted without an associated permit for a primary dwelling unit that is at least as tall or taller than the ADU proposed.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Brenda and a second from Adrian. Let's go ahead and take a vote. John?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Good luck on your construction. I feel like
You.
these days you all need luck on that. Thank you. All right, thank you, Diana. We'll move on to our next agenda item, in the amended agenda. So this would be item number 3, which is the Pacific Yard Design Review and Plan Development. This, we have a plan development portion, which is case number PLN PCM 2021-00822, and then a design review portion, which is case number PLN PCM 2021-00835. And Laura is here for staff tonight.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just a recap. This project is in the granary, and in the general commercial district, or CG zone. The proposed building...
Can you speak closer to your microphone?
The proposed building is 7 stories tall and includes 292 units and 202 parking stalls. So the parking garage entry is off of 700 South, and it has a mid-block walkway on the western property line. The building includes commercial space and a leasing office and amenity area on the ground floor. And the building will also have a ground floor outdoor dining area, as well as 2 upper floor rooftop decks. So the request from the applicant is for approval for 28 feet of additional building height, and then via design review, and a plan development approval for relief from base zone requirements in the CG district, namely 10-foot setbacks for front, corner, and rear yards, 10-foot front and corner landscape yards, and then 7,700 square feet of additional landscaping requirement that is triggered by approvals of additional height in the CG zone. So just again, to kind of go into those modifications, the red indicates the area that they are requesting relief from in terms of the setbacks. It's only that front and corner side yard where there would be a landscaping relief request. The yellow there is the mid-block walkway. And again, for a landscape yard, we require that a third of it be vegetated, which in this case would equal just over 1,600 square feet of vegetation. In terms of the additional landscaping, because the 2 floors in addition that they're requesting total 77,000 square feet rather, that generates that 10% requirement for additional landscaping. And so just to recap some of the concerns, this item was tabled at the February 23rd meeting, and the discussion was around concerns from the Ballpark, Central Ninth, and Downtown Community Councils related to the lack of landscape yards and additional landscaping. There was a request from the Commission for clarification on whether the applicant was asking for a reduction in vegetation required by zoning code versus landscaping. The Commission also expressed concerns related to the lack of support from the community councils, and wanted the applicant to evaluate if, there was a discussion rather of evaluating whether the amenities that the applicant was providing were a better use of the space and a better use for the neighborhood than landscape yards would be. And then there was a request that the applicant evaluate options for division of the frontage that incorporated some open space. So the motion that was made was to table the request and asking the applicant to explore solutions on the setbacks and landscaping and vegetation relief with input from the public. The commission also clarified that the applicant was not expected to return to the community councils, and the motion passed with 2 no and 5 yes votes. So I want to just call your attention to the way that we define landscaping in Salt Lake City Code. So you can see the definition there. It's the improvement of a lot, parcel, or tract of land with grass, shrubs, and trees. That said, it doesn't only include vegetation. You can include pedestrian walks, ornamental objects such as fountains, statuary, and other similar natural and artificial objects designed and arranged to produce an aesthetically pleasing effect. So we actually specify when we talk about landscape yards and park strip landscaping that 1/3 of the area must be covered with vegetation. So that's the minimum. In this case, this property, between those landscape yards that they're requesting relief from, as well as the park strip area that exists, and actually they are going to be building a new park strip and rebuilding the curb on 400 West, that it would require 4,000 square feet of vegetation total for the entire kind of 1.25 acre property plus the park strips. Although we do require that additional landscaping in the CG zone, we never define it in our code. I looked and couldn't find anything. So there's not a particular amount of vegetation that we say they need to hit in providing that additional landscaping. So the applicant's presentation will go into much more detail about how they've responded, but just to give you a very brief idea, all the entryways and window areas are recessed. There are planters provided at each recessed area. There are trellises along the street-facing building facades and the mid-block walkway, which contain 4 species of vines. They've provided additional trees, shrubs, grasses, and vines on the mid-block walkway, and as well as clarified the amount of square footage of vegetation that they are providing, as well as that's on the rooftop deck areas. And so ultimately, the proposal includes approximately 9,900 square feet of vegetation that's designed to Salt Lake City standards. I'm briefly going to go into conditions of approval that I brought up at the last time, just so that it can be included in any motion that might eventually occur. We asked that the applicant provide an awning of 4 feet in depth to mitigate the building mass and improve the relationship of the building height to human scale. As well as provide a tree form with a spreading canopy in the park strip in order to help, again, create more human scale space on the sidewalk. So the recommendation, in planning staff's opinion, based on the findings in the staff report, is that the project meets the applicable standards and recommends the Planning Commission approve the requests with the following conditions. Final approval of the details for public art, lighting, streetscape, street furniture, mid-block walkway, paving, sidewalk paving, and landscaping be delegated to planning staff, that the applicant provide an awning of 4 feet in depth, as long as an encroachment agreement is approved, and then a final approval for a tree form with a spreading canopy in the park strip be delegated to planning staff, that a public easement will be recorded on the mid-block walkway, and the applicant shall record city approval to consolidate the 3 parcels. So I can take questions on the process or how we arrived at some of that information I provided. But again, the applicant has a presentation that can go into more detail on what is actually being provided.
Okay, commissioners, any question for staff at this point? Okay, we'll invite the applicant, James Alfondre. If you want to come on up, there you are. And I know you're familiar with the process, but just to restate, just give us your name and then you'll have up to 10 minutes. Whenever you start.
I'm James Alfondre with Urban Alfondre. And like Laura said, going over the recap of what our discussion was last time, we were tasked to go back and find a way to add more vegetated coverage than to supplement our ask of reduction in landscape buffer and extra height. Let me just get this going. So that's what we did. So we went back and we actually took calculations on what our landscape coverage or our vegetated coverage we were providing in our first proposal. And it actually was really close to the vegetated coverage that's required if we kept a 10-foot landscape buffer and adding the extra height that we're requesting. But we went back and found creative ways to add more vegetated coverage, particularly in the mid-block walkway and along the building facade. So we have a I'll run through our calculations and how we came up with that. But just by coincidence, we were in DC touring Union Market, which is a wonderful neighborhood that is a warehouse district that's being revitalized, and they don't have any landscape buffers or park strips, and we're fortunate to have that. So what they did was they got pretty creative in adding trellises and planters along the facade to add some more vegetation coverage. So we took that inspiration and added the same kind of feel to Pacific Yard. It also creates more rhythm as you go down the street, so we are providing more vegetation along the facade of the building in vertical elements and through planters and through plantings. Also, this is found, we're adding more in the mid-block walkway as well. And just to reiterate, we're also providing about 1,000 more square feet of public open space in the mid-block walkway than what is required. The requirement is a 10-foot minimum wide, and we're doing a 16-foot minimum wide, or 16-foot wide mid-block walkway. Another thing that was lost in our last discussion was we are required to provide this amount of street trees, but as a condition to that, we are providing the largest canopy spreading trees that is in accordance with the Salt Lake Forestry Plan. So we're also adding 9 trees in the courtyard and more vegetation in the courtyard as well. So between all of that, what we did is, as Laura said, a landscape buffer, we took the square footage of the landscape buffer requirements and the extra landscaping that's required through a design review height approval. And we calculated not the area, but we calculated the third of those spaces that are required for vegetation. The other 2/3 can be rocks, mulch. It's not vegetated coverage. So what we found out is that in order to meet the landscape buffer requirements and the additional height, we have to provide 5,282 square feet of vegetated coverage. In our new proposal, we are providing 9,870 square feet of vegetated coverage. So we're providing 54% more vegetated coverage than what's required if we kept our 10-foot landscape buffer and still got our extra height. This is across the street from us. It's a by right building, and this is what a typical landscape buffer looks like by right. It's landscaping, but again, only a third of it has to be landscaping. The rest of it can be rocks, mulch, whatever the case is. So we're really leveraging the park strips and our courtyard and the mid-block walkway to provide real robust vegetated coverage in those areas. We took our calculations from the city provided hydrozone schedule from 2013. That's where we got all of our calculations and information from. This is the current right-of-way on 400 West. This is the current right-of-way on 700 South. And this is what the new the new right-of-way and park strip and sidewalk would look like. As you can see, we're adding trellises and planters, large spreading canopied trees, and a real robust park strip. So that's the task we were given, and that's how we're responding to it, and feel like we're not only providing a more enhanced product than what's required by zoning through our ground floor activation and our pedestrian scale and keeping in line with the existing neighborhood pattern, but we're also adding a more robust landscape coverage than what would be required by right.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, commissioners, for the applicant at this time?
Was this new proposal taken back to the city councils? I know it wasn't required, but I wonder if it was, community councils.
No, it was not.
Or did you receive any new public input? I don't, maybe I see some.
It was pretty clear during the motion that we weren't required to go back to the community council. We just were given the task of finding a way to provide more vegetated coverage.
I do see a couple of maybe of new comments.
There were 2 comments
Yeah.
from members of the public who live in Sugar House.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll open the public comment period and then we'll bring it back after that's done. I don't have any cards for this particular item, but is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Okay, I see none, so I will close the public comment period. Commissioners, do you have a... What? I didn't know we had another room. Who is monitoring that? Oh, okay.
They can, I believe, at least hear and see the meeting.
Okay.
So.
They can hear it, and John was going to be setting up a monitor over there so that they can see it.
Okay.
We just give a little extra time
Okay.
for
If
public
there is
comments.
anyone in the overflow room that wishes to comment on this, now is your time to cross the hall and give us your comments. We'll count it out. I think that's good. Seeing none, I will officially close the public comment period for this item and bring it back to the commissioners for a discussion. And/or motion. There's 2 separate motions on this one, so it's up to you guys.
I didn't see these before because they're at the very end of the packet, not because they're I should have looked at the end of the packet, but that's where they are, the 2 comments about the change in plan.
Amy, will you speak closer to your microphone?
Yeah, and neither one of them feels satisfied with this. One of them is Judy Short, who's on the land use, she is the land use chair for Sugar House Community Council. So I know there wasn't a requirement to go to the community council, but that's what those 2 comments on. They're at the very end if you want to look at them.
I'm willing to make a motion unless there's other discussion.
Yeah, is there any other discussion? Go ahead.
Based on the analysis and findings in the staff report and the testimony presented, I move that the Planning Commission approve Plan Development Application PLN PCM 2021-00822, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion from Adrian and a second from John. We'll go ahead and take a vote on that motion. Maureen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and I'm open for the second motion.
I'll go ahead. Based on the analysis and findings in the staff report, the testimony and the proposal presented, I move that the Planning Commission approve design review application PLN PCM 2021-00835, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion from Adrian again, and a second from John. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Brenda?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Brenda? Did I already say you?
I already voted
Sorry,
yes.
John.
Yes.
Hey, Maureen.
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously as well. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
wondering. Okay, moving on to the next item. If you are here to speak on the Swanner item and you haven't filled out a card, please go out in the hall and take the time to do that, and you can pass them to John, and they'll get them to me. That'll help us manage. And if you're in the overflow room and you wish to speak on this item, please do grab a card out in the right outside of these main doors and fill that out, and then hand that up, and we'll be able to make sure to call on you. Okay. Thank you. Just want to make sure. Okay, and then I do have a card, but it doesn't tell me the subject, from Denise Payne. Is this the item you wanted to speak on, Swanner? Okay. All right. So this is our next agenda item, which is the Swanner preliminary subdivision at approximately 2691 North, 2200 West. This is case number PLN SUB 2021-00740. The planner tonight on this is Daniel. And right before you start, though, Daniel, I want to take a moment just to try and give us some commissioners' context of what, because that was a lot of information. Thank you.
Understood.
I think 468 pages is the most I've ever gotten for one of the agendas, so you win. But there's two main things for us to talk about, and in my discussions with planning staff on Monday to try to wrap my head around this, it was really suggested that one of the things we talk about first, so just kind of keep in your mind as you as we go through this, is the first question is that modification to block length, and is it warranted, right? And so we can then make that determination on the recommendation we want to make, because we are not the final decision makers, but so that we don't muddy everything together. The first thing I'll really try to tackle is, do we feel that that modification to the block length is warranted, and we'll make our recommendation. The second part is really about the subdivision standards. I forgot to write down what page number they were on. If you can grab that at some point to help us, because there are a lot of standards in this report about wetlands and roads and all this other stuff, that those are things that the city will be reviewing when a development comes for that lot. And so any development will have to meet all of those things. They're not necessarily anything that we will then be reviewing unless that development, that project needs to come before the Planning Commission. So just to try to help us focus and not get really off track is those 6 standards for the subdivision. And that way we can have a more fruitful discussion about what recommendation we're actually making, and then it will move on to the city council. I certainly don't want to squash any talk about other options because this is a lot. This is really, in some cases, really kind of overwhelming with all of the things. And so, but I want us to recognize that all of those standards that Daniel provided us aren't necessarily things that we ever would even see, that the city would make sure that they are met when a development proposal came for lot 1 and then lot 2 and then lot 3. We're really looking at the standards for creating these lots as empty lots.
Right.
Okay.
And those standards are on page 50.
50?
50.
Okay.
Attachment
Just
F.
to clarify, this doesn't go to the city council, this goes to
Oh,
the
sorry,
mayor,
yes,
right?
you're right. Thank you. Yeah, this is actually the one that we're making a recommendation to the mayor, and the mayor makes the final decision. Thank you for that. I did know that, I just forgot it. Page 50 will be the subdivision standards that we really need to review this proposal to. But Daniel, I'm very glad this is your project because you will explain it greatly to us, and the floor is yours, Daniel.
Thank you. So, again, this is a subdivision request by Scannell Development for a 20-lot subdivision at 2691 North.
Can you talk closer to your microphone?
2691 North, 2200 West. The property is about 430 acres in size and is mostly vacant. It's located at one of the northmost points of the city to the west of I-215. It's surrounded by agricultural, some recreational, and some residential property, with vacant airport property generally to the south occupies most of the land, the southwest corner. Again, it's proposed to be divided into 20 lots with new streets through the site and improvements and widening of adjacent streets. It also includes new utility infrastructure. So, again, most subdivisions are approved by city staff and don't come before the commission for approval. This is before the commission, again, because of the block size issue. They are coming before you for a recommendation on the block size modification, and that block modification would go to the mayor for an approval. And just up front, we are recommending approval of the subdivision with conditions, and we are recommending that the commission send a positive recommendation on the modification request. So again, the subdivision is dividing the property into 20 new lots. So we have the lots, and then we have new public roads that are proposed through the property. This includes a north-south running roadway at 2900 West, and also an east-west running roadway at 2950 North. As part of this, they will also be widening 2200 West, which is the roadway located on the east border of the subdivision. They are also dedicating and improving an existing private street at the very top north point of the subdivision. This is 3300 North. They will also be required to make all the necessary improvements to that street. Additionally, they are required to improve 3200 West on the west border of the subdivision. Just to note, though, this road could be closed in the future and not improved, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. And a small section at the bottom southmost point of the subdivision needs to be dedicated, as this portion of the roadway was never dedicated in the past, but the majority of 3200 West was actually already dedicated. So with this, there will be new infrastructure required to serve the subdivision: water, sewer, drainage, utilities, all brought up to the subdivision and then run through all of the public ways that they're proposing to dedicate. So a subdivision process is different than most petitions that come before the commission. The commission's purview for a subdivision is limited to property lines, roadways, road plans, utility plans, which includes sewer, water, and storm drains. The standards of review really only pertain to these things, and the standards ask whether the proposal meets these minimum code requirements. So there's not much discretion in the code requirements. If you meet a lot size standard or a roadway standard, we have to prove the subdivision. Things like buildings, uses, or site design of lots, those are outside of the subdivision purview. And with subdivisions, conditions are normal. Preliminary subdivision plans are not final buildable construction plans. Final plans aren't developed until the city actually provides preliminary approval. Then a developer will go forward and develop final infrastructure plans that include full technical, engineering, and utility regulation compliance. Conditions generally refer to requirements for those details in more detailed final plans. So there's 6 main standards for subdivision. I'm just going to go briefly over those. The first standard is whether a subdivision complies with the subdivision design standards, and there are a lot of those, and you can see those in the report. Examples, though, of those are roadway widths, locations of roads, dead-end street limits, and block dimensions, which you're looking at tonight. And just one note, again, it doesn't meet the block size regulations, so that is coming before you for a modification. The second standard is whether all buildable lots comply with all applicable zoning standards, and that's simply we look at the business park zoning for this lot, and we see that it meets the minimum lot size, minimum lot width requirements, and we say that it meets the standard. We have included a condition here allowing for some flexibility in what the lot lines are in a corner of the property where there's a canal, and I'll touch on that on another slide. The third condition or third standard is all necessary and required dedications are made. So in other words, are streets and associated utility easements proposed where they're required to be proposed by code? So we look at the major street plan that the city has adopted that establishes where roads are supposed to be, and we look at the subdivision proposal and check that they have proposed roads in those same locations. In this case, they have proposed roads in those same locations, so we find that they did meet this standard. We have just put a condition in here, though, related to the 3200 West improvements. Again, I'll get into that to another slide. But just to provide the flexibility, if 3200 West is closed, then we wouldn't require it to be improved. The fourth standard is whether water supply and sewage disposal are satisfactory to the Public Utilities Department Director. Again, preliminary plans are not final detailed plans. We can make some preliminary reviews. So the Public Utilities Department has looked at that, found that it generally meets the requirements, but there's a number of different detailed standards that they're going to have to meet and comply in their final detailed plans. So the condition for this is that final plans comply with all other detailed utility regulations. And then the fifth standard is provisions for construction of any required public improvements are included. Again, this goes back to these are preliminary plans, but it's asking us to include provisions in the approval that these final detailed requirements are going to be done. So we've included a condition that improvements will comply with all those additional detailed regulations when they do their final plans. And we've also included a condition that other improvements to adjacent city streets could be required based on the results of a traffic study and transportation division review and approval. And finally, the standard is subdivisions otherwise comply with all applicable laws and regulations. And we can't completely verify that in preliminary. Again, there are other applicable regulations like utility and water codes, engineering codes, and federal and state codes. So one example of this is that there are some wetlands on the property. And the developer is going to go and has provided plans to the Army Corps of Engineers for review of those wetlands. And so we have to add a condition here that we will need to verify federal wetland compliance before the city will actually accept any of the roadways that they are showing on this subdivision map. And again, same standard, final infrastructure plans will need to comply with all other detailed regulations. So this gets us to the requested modification to the block size, which is the key issue for the commission. So the commission is required to make a recommendation on this request as part of the subdivision, but again, the final decision is up to the mayor. So the block size regulation in question is a 3,000 foot perimeter length limit for blocks. So if you actually implement that regulation, you end up with, just for example, a 750 foot long by 750 foot wide city block. That was imposed in our subdivision ordinance in order to get walkable subdivision design. And I think that's pretty important for a number of areas in the city, but that standard did not take into consideration the industrial areas where we have very large warehousing and we have very auto-oriented, truck-oriented development patterns. There's some issues if we actually require compliance with this. The first one is that it requires additional intersections on 2200 West. These are additional vehicle conflict points on 2200 West where we have a number of residences. The second is that imposing this would require the subdivision to be crisscrossed by a number of additional city streets. That's a financial burden on the city. We don't anticipate that these would actually be fully utilized by any development that's out here. So it would be a long-term maintenance burden for the city. And then third, it doesn't align with city policies for 2200 West that actually discourage new roadway connections onto 2200 West. And so we have a plan out here. This is the North Point plan that was adopted in 2001. And it has a policy in there that actually says that roadway connections should be restricted or prohibited on 2200 West. So because of those reasons, we are recommending that you send a positive recommendation to the mayor to modify the regulation. We think it's reasonable to only have one connection point onto 2200 West. So some other considerations that are important here, in particular, is the 3200 West improvements. We received a number of concerns about impacts to wildlife if 3200 West is improved. So 3200 West is the roadway shown in blue on this map. It divides the property from property owned by Rudy Reclamation. Rudy Reclamation has a number of large wetlands on the property that provide bird habitat. And we received concerns that a actually improved roadway on 3200 West would result in a lot more traffic on 3200 West and potential negative impacts to birds and wildlife in that area. So based on that and based on some input from the developer, city departments actually looked at that more detail and determined that really 3200 West would essentially be a redundant road if they build 2900 West. Transportation supports essentially not improving 3200 West if 2900 West is actually built. On top of that, airport has some plans to make some adjustments to a runway down by 2100 North that would actually adjust where 3200 West is located eastward to more in line with 2900 West here. So traffic actually wouldn't be coming up from 3200 West in the long term, potentially. But the issue is that this is a city street, or shown on a city street plan. 3200 West is shown as a collector street on our official street plan. And because it's shown on our official plan, we don't have a lot of flexibility to say, well, no, sure, you don't have to do it. Improvements and dedication are required when a roadway is shown on one of our plans. But having said that, because of the support to eliminate 3200 West in the long term, the city is considering options to potentially initiate a street closure petition or amend the city's major street plan to remove it and not require its improvement. So we have added a condition of approval here that just makes it clear that it is an option to waive those 3200 West improvements in the long term. Another consideration here is the developer is proposing to modify a canal location. So there is a canal that runs through the property at the southwest area of the subdivision. It runs through lots 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. They're proposing to shift that canal so that it runs along the east side of 3200 West. The thing here is that the city owns or has a deed to that canal from 1916. So the developer needs to negotiate with the city to actually move that canal. And they are in the process of negotiating with the Public Utilities Department, who actually manages our canals, to move that canal. There is a potential that Public Utilities doesn't agree that the canal be moved. And in that case, property lines may need to be adjusted to ensure that each of the sites has adequate access to the proposed new public streets. So we have proposed a condition to allow some movement of their proposed property lines to accommodate the canal location if that ends up being necessary. Some other items to note that are somewhat outside of the purview here. 2200 West access has been a concern from residents. The subdivision is proposing that one roadway connection on 2950 North onto 2200 West, and residents have requested that no access to the site from 2200 West be allowed at all. And they do point to the North Point Master Plan policy, which is to restrict or prohibit access from 2200 West into the site. The issue here is that the subdivision process does not refer to compliance with master plans. It just simply refers to our major street plan, and our major street plan has no such access restrictions on the plan. Additionally, there's no city standards that were adopted after that master plan was adopted to actually prohibit access onto 2200 West. So we don't have any teeth to say you can't access the property from 2200 West. So we're unable to prohibit a proposed roadway connection onto 2200 West. Another question that has come up is, can the city hold up an application while a new master plan is in progress? And just for context here, the 2001 North Point master plan is currently going through an update. We have a consultant working on updating that plan. They've done some outreach, and they're working on a draft plan at this point. But just because a master plan is in progress, it doesn't put a hold on any development in the area that the master plan is dealing with. So there's state codes that say that we have to process an application that comes before us. We can't just hold up the application because a master plan is in progress. Another important thing to note is that the developer is actually proposing a bypass road off-site on property they don't own, which would cross through airport property. So the Swanner site is this site here, and they are building this bypass road that goes through almost the middle of the property. But our major street plan does call for an additional segment of bypass road that connects to 2200 West. They are proposing an alternative to that connects straight down to 2100 North. Both options would run through city airport property. The issue here is that the city can't require a subdivider to actually do something on someone else's property as a condition of approval for their own site. So we don't have the ability to make them build this extension of the bypass road because it is on airport property. Having said that, the developer has been working with airport, and airport has actually provided a comment in the staff report that supports construction of the road, but the developer still needs to work with airport. They do have to require payment of a fee to actually use their property. So they'll have to continue work with them, continue work with engineering and transportation on what that roadway actually ends up looking like. And just to add on to that, the realignment actually does align with the airport's own long-term plans, which again call for a reconfiguration of 3200 West to more of a 2900 West configuration. So I think that covers most of the major topics on the subdivision. Again, staff's recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the block size modification to the mayor. And we are also recommending approval of the subdivision with the conditions listed in the staff report. Just noting approval is conditioned on the mayor approval of the block size.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I have some questions, and then we'll open it up for the rest. So, as always, correct me if I'm wrong, but so you have this master plan that is in process, and it should be, I think, done here, at least the first part of it, done here pretty soon. So potentially any development on these lots, would be subject to the updated master plan.
That is true. So when a master plan's adopted, it's usually followed by zoning changes to implement it. And so this property could be subject to those subsequent zoning changes.
So I feel that most of the comments that we got, which were very, very good, especially from the Audubon Society and Rudy's, brought up a lot of points that seem more salient to the master plan. That is the place where they would be addressed. And I don't know where you're at in the public process, but then I would encourage, I guess, the public to participate in that component, because then when development comes, then that would be subject to the master plan. And right now, there's no development. We're just talking about the block size. So, okay, that's what I figured. And then, so on this bypass road regarding the airport land, is that extension required for, well, I guess, I don't know how to say this, but is that extension that you just talked about part of what would then make this subdivision lot have the necessary infrastructure at that point? Is that part required for that?
It's not. So all necessary infrastructure can come up 2200 West and serve the property. If the developer chooses to, they could potentially add some additional infrastructure through this bypass road. But the plans now are to run all necessary infrastructure up 2200 West.
Up 2200 West?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Not the bypass road, up
Okay.
the existing 2200 West.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, commissioners.
Wait,
Go
you
ahead.
say by infrastructure, I'm sorry, Amy, I just want to
No, go
clarify
ahead,
this
Brenda.
particular point. So all the traffic would go up 2200 West, is that correct?
Correct.
For, what, 6 million square feet of space, or whatever
Yes.
it is? All the traffic will go up 2200 West.
Yes.
So, of course, they would have to improve 2200 West in order to do that, but until this 2900 West happens, we're talking 6 million square feet being served on 2200 West. Okay, just,
Yes.
thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for staff at this time?
I wonder if there's precedent for the mayor making block size changes.
So this issue came before the commission in January, where the commission authorized, delegated to staff the ability to deal with subdivisions that have blocks that are over that size.
Mm-hmm.
But the BP zone, which this property is in, was not included in that.
Right, now I remember that, but it was for a specific zone. For everything, but not this?
Yeah.
Every zone except this zone?
It covered a number of zones, generally west of I-215, generally M1, CG.
We recommended to do that? And did the mayor do it?
The mayor has approved some subdivisions, yes. Yep.
It's not your last call for questions, so if they come up later, you'll be able to ask them. But we'll go ahead and bring the applicant up, which is Patrick Marcotti and Colby Anderson.
Dan Harrington, Wisconsin Properties, if that's okay.
Yeah, when you get to the microphone, just state your name for the record. And then we'll give you 10 minutes. But go ahead, what was your name again?
Dan Harrington, Wisconsin Properties.
Harrington or Arrington?
Harrington.
Thanks.
And Daniel went through a lot of detail, so I don't know how much deeper I intend
That's
to
okay.
go.
We can just get his name really quick.
I'm Colby Anderson with
You're
AWA.
Colby. Okay, Mr. Harrington, go ahead.
Before I get started, one thing I want to say is it's been really fantastic working with the city on this project. This has been a number of months to get us here. And I think as the report showed, not only were there a lot of facts in there, but our intent behind some of the things that we did were pretty clearly stated. And that's only done through a lot of communication that occurred between us and Daniel's group and transportation and utilities and the airport, and everybody has had a pretty open door and been available to us to communicate. And I just wanted to say we really appreciate that, and it's been really fantastic working with your city. With me here today, Patrick Marcotte, he's the Director of Development with Scannell, myself, Mark Wilson. Colby Anderson is with Anderson Whalen and Associates. He's a civil engineer on the project, so he'll be the one putting together all those final plans that Daniel was talking about that we need to do after we get through this initial process. And also with me today is Brent Bateman. He's our attorney helping us with our land use and getting everything to this point. So just a little bit about Scannell. We're a privately owned development company. We do projects all over the country. Here's some of the states that we work in, and we're also in Europe. So we're pretty busy in the build-to-suit and speculative development world across the country. Some of the brands that we work with on a regular basis, repeat business is probably 80% of our work, and these are a lot of the clients that we hope to attract to our various developments, and maybe some of them will even come to Salt Lake City. I won't get too into the details because Daniel kind of covered it, but just an alternative aerial plan showing the location of our site in relation to the airport. Zoomed in, as Daniel showed, our site's bordered between 2200 West and 3200 West. This is the park plan that was included in the staff report. It's oriented with north-facing left, so that's why it may look a little strange, but this is ultimately our current plan for the park. Obviously, that includes our ability to relocate the Rudy Drain. If that's not something that's able to happen, we'll modify accordingly to not move that. And then this shows our connection points to 2200 West, and then this is the north part of the bypass road that comes through our development. And then this is the corresponding lot layout that Daniel shared earlier. This is just an alternative view showing the improvements that we intend to make to the roadways. This is similar to the drawing that Daniel showed, but the blue line here is this bypass road coming from 2100 North up through our site, and then connecting on the north end. Items shown in orange would be future road expansions as develop occurs in the area. One thing I do want to point out is while initially all traffic would be coming from 2200 West, the intent is that we get the bypass road built as soon as possible. I mean, we're already working with the airport to try to get that done. We're starting the process with the Corps of Engineers and also our wetlands consultant to do delineations and determine if there's any wetlands on the property that we would have to deal with. And, we want to build that road just as soon as possible. It would never be our intent to have all 6 million square feet built and not have another point of entry to the site beyond 2200 West. It wouldn't be a very functional park from our perspective if that was our only means of ingress and egress. This was a preliminary phasing plan we had put together. I think the intent is, we're coming out of the ground initially with 2 buildings. It would be building 2 and building 3 here. However, we would probably be doing 1 to 2 to 3 buildings a year. So this is a multi-year, 7 to 10 year build out of the park. It would be our intent. And then on the revision of the block length, Daniel pointed out that the current standard is 3,000 feet for the block area. I think he even proposed exhibit that showed some of the roadways that would have to be installed for us to meet that. This plan shows kind of what that would look like. I did a quick takeoff. If we had to meet that requirement, we would have almost 8 miles of roadway that we would have to build in the park here, versus the less than 2.5 that would go in as part of our current plan. So those would all be roads that would have utilities and be maintained by the city, and it wouldn't be a very efficient park for us. And then this is just as an example, the current layout that we have for the preliminary plat. So that's kind of it for my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant at this time? So I'm just wondering then, with your phase out of your build, when you intend to build the bypass road in relationship to your actual building builds?
I think ideally I'd like to see the bypass road built and complete as close to the completion of the first couple of buildings as possible. Obviously, this is dependent on getting through some processes with the city. We have to design it as well as the rest of the park. So ideally, we'd like to see that complete as close to the completion of the first 2 buildings as possible.
Okay.
Now, we would, if it is possible, we would like to initially use the bypass road as a construction access. So if possible, get a gravel road or something that pulls our construction traffic as much as possible off of 2200 West and bring it up into the site that way, as opposed to coming up 2200 West.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, I will have you guys hold tight. We'll open the public comment period. If there's any, I'll give you a chance to address anything that comes up during that after I close the public comment period. So just get comfortable. We're gonna open the public comment period. If you filled out a card, great. I will first be calling your name in order as you come up. You would please state your name in the microphone for the record, and then you'll have 2 minutes. This is a comment period, so we don't stop for a back and forth Q&A, but you are more than welcome to ask questions. I will write them down, and I will pose them to either the applicant or staff once the public comment period is closed, but I won't stop what we're doing in order to give you an answer at that time. But I am going to be writing them down. Since we're back in person, I also want to just make the notice that we really want some decorum. So no yelling, no clapping, no booing, no any of that. We want to treat everyone with equal respect, regardless of what your comments are this evening. So with that, we will begin. My first up for my card is Dan Thompson. If you just want to step up to that microphone, state your name, and then you have 2 minutes, Mr. Thompson.
Hello, I'm Dan Thompson, resident of 2200 West, 2600 North. I am the second house going north from 2100 North. I have a question on this bypass road. They want to put that in between the buildings that. Okay. They want to take this bypass road and from 2100 all the way through on 2900 to 3300. But they want to put in 2 buildings before they even start this bypass road. 2200 we have on the south end is where the sewer and water ends at the new complex that is being built right now. We are going to get the majority, I'd say all of the traffic from their construction north on there. They have to do the infrastructure I believe, before they put in their buildings, so it's there, so it's ready to hook up. It's a big issue. That road is only 30 feet wide in spots, 25 feet wide in other spots. It's pretty scary, believe me. When I pull in my driveway and you got, 65-mile-an-hour person behind you gonna just, tag you most of the time, and they'll come out and around you, but they will come on top of you. When you got 80,000 pounds of earth coming at you, it's pretty hard to stop. And most of them right now, to this day, they're between 40 and 60 miles an hour coming in with loads of dirt. And the road is 30 miles an hour. And I can't hear you. I'm done?
Yeah, my microphone was not on. Yeah, your time is up. Thank you. I apologize for that oversight. Next up, I have Dave Tolman. He left, so I will. Okay, I will read. He marked he is in support, and his comments were, I own 125 acres across the street from the subject property and support the project. Okay, next up is Peter, and I will not attempt to say your last name. So please state that for the record.
Yeah, Peter Angewerden. I do live in the neighborhood, not right on 2200, and really appreciate the comments by the city workers and Dan. It was a very good presentation. I kind of realize we're late to the party here, and that's fine. I think that it's hard for me to be pragmatic about everything I heard today about maybe there's wetlands out there. I mean, the whole area is wetlands, really. Maybe not federally designated as such. Certainly there's a lot of wildlife concerns which you've heard about. Mostly I have sympathy for the people on 2200 West. Certainly I go out to 3200 to hike on that road or ride a bike through the bike route on 2200. Certainly it won't be safe during this process, but I don't want to take up any more of anyone's time. Just a couple rhetorical questions. Where do the rest of the wildlife go? Where, we have all these warehouses across the street already. Some of them haven't even been leased yet. I understand the need for more high-density housing, and I respect the right of the landowner to use the land as they see fit. I just am worried about the lack of remaining open space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up is Jack Ray.
Thank you. I'm here today on behalf of Rudy Reclamation and North Point Reclamation. Combined, we own about 3,700 acres of land on the opposite side of 3200 West. And oftentimes you hear about the beauty and the majesty of the Great Salt Lake and the ecosystem and the tremendous wealth of wildlife that exists in connection with the Great Salt Lake. That's the property they're talking about. That's what they're talking about. For over 110 years, we have viewed the nurturing and the care of that land as a stewardship that's been passed down to us. We hope to pass it down to generations yet to come that extend for centuries yet to come so that people can enjoy that resource. On the way to this meeting, I stopped by the Rudy Reclamation property and I saw cars parked along 3200 West, which is an unimproved dirt road right now and has been ever since it came into existence at some point in the distant past. They were bird watching because those wetlands extend right up to 3200 West, right up to it. And that road is considered one of the bird watching hotspots of Salt Lake County. It's our concern that development directly on the other side of the street is going to have a significant negative impact. And it's very important that 3200 West not be improved. The city really isn't anxious to improve it, as you gathered from Mr. Echeverria's comments. The developer, as I understand, and they can maybe confirm this, is not interested in improving 3200 West. Improving 3200 West would impose a steady stream of semis and other traffic and lights and noise on those wetlands that are very productive. The jurisdiction of the city, interestingly enough, only extends halfway across 3200 West. The other half of 3200 West, the western half, is under the jurisdiction of Salt Lake County. My comments here, and by the way, we support the developer's request for the block size modification. We've had the opportunity to speak with the developer. We've had some positive discussions, and we appreciate their candor and their willingness to meet with us and to work through some difficult issues. There are going to be more difficult issues that will come up in the future. But what I want to impress here today is that the wetlands in this area are far closer to proposed development than any wetlands in the northwest quadrant are to the inland port.
That's time.
Let's take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Okay, next up is Denise Payne.
My name's Denise Payne. I live at 2848 North, 2200 West. 2200 West is a street, a small street, that has not been improved since 1983. I ran into one of the streets department employees. Probably 3 months ago, he was out there just surveying and looking around, saying they were going to be improving the road. He asked me how long we'd been out here. He had worked for the streets department for 10 years and didn't even know the road existed. It's a small road that's already falling apart, and any construction going on out there is just going to tear it apart even more. There's residents on the east side, wetlands on the west side. I really hope the city thinks about this before they agree to anything, because that one road, 2200 West, is not going to work. There's going to be more accidents than there already has been. You can't ride your bike on that road anymore without a semi running you off the road. Or if there's a car coming towards another semi the way it is, with no improvements, which is the way it's going to be for quite a while, you have to move off the road in order for the semi to get past you. It's dangerous, and I really wish people would go out and look at what they're going to be voting on before they do it, because it really makes a difference to the people that live out there, residents, agriculture. I don't know how I'm going to pull our trailers out with all of that going on the road. It's just really dangerous, and I hope you'll take that into consideration.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Terry Marasco. Sorry. Sure. All right, Allison Musser.
You actually said my last name correctly, which is rare. I get Mooser a lot, so. My name is Allison Musser. I just want to thank you for your time tonight. I'm a property owner along 2200 West. I don't have any concerns with the developer's request tonight for the block modification. Instead, I just want to use this time to reiterate my support for the letter you received from the West Point Community Council. So that had 4 kind of primary topics on it. First is the scheduling of the construction roadways. We have spoken with Scannell. They've been really great and transparent with us, and we're grateful that they are taking into consideration not just the road that the city was initially going to develop, but an improved road that is going to mitigate traffic off of 2200 West. And we're really thankful for that. At the same time, I'm having a really difficult time accepting that construction is going to potentially begin and likely begin prior to that construction access bypass road being developed. 2200 West is already falling apart, and I just can't imagine large trucks hauling dirt out of there on 2200 West for what we're told is probably going to be 5 to 6 months, but probably more. So ideally, we'd ask that the construction bypass road be complete before construction begins. Additionally, while that bypass road is going to mitigate traffic on 2200 West, we'd really like to see the city and even Scannell take more formal measures to limit or prohibit tractor trailers along 2200 West during peak traffic hours. Not always. We do have residents in the area who drive tractor trailers for a living, so they would of course need to be exempt. Denise and others have already mentioned that 2200 West is going to be a piecemeal road. And we really feel like the city needs to complete the improvements along that road. Not after, not when a developer decides to develop, but now, because that master plan that is being developed and going to be launched here soon, it's no longer the future, it's the here and now. And so we'd love to see the city invest in that. Lastly, we also just would love for you all to, rather than assessing the impact of individual warehouses, individual developments, we really want to assess the cumulative effect that all of these developments are having on the west side: health, safety, quality of life. This is all going to impact us, the residents. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, next is Chris Souther.
Also said my last name right. Yeah, I have no disagreement with the block size change if it actually truly will reduce the amount of curb cuts going into 2200 West. I just want to echo what Allison was saying. 2200 West is just a glorified barn, it's a dirt road that has been abused and is small. When we had the developments off of 2100 North begin, I've lived on this road for about 12 years now, and we've had a lot of animals, and until they started the developments and the trucks started coming, in the time that they built those buildings, I had to bury about 7 animals because of the trucks not being able to slow down to watch their way, and luckily none of that was part of my actual family. It was just animals at that point. I have videos of trucks trying to pass each other on that road, and you cannot pass 2 trucks on that road without someone having to drop one tire off the side or the other. It's that dangerous. And for us to have the notion that we're going to have to wait 6 months to a year with fully burdened trucks driving up and down 2200 West is absolutely crazy. It is not safe, it is not proper, and that is not a development plan that should be sustained by any city, because it is a huge liability, because it is a known liability. And if it's only delaying a project by 6 months to get an access road put in place properly, then that's what should be done. So that is, those are my concerns mainly, is access to the development. The right-of-ways and everything else, they've been very transparent about it, and we've been very grateful about that. But the access and the timing of the development is extremely crucial in this one. And the very last comment I wanted was, Business Park has been, that zoning has been there for a very long time. It never has been appropriate for this area, and it never will be appropriate for this area. And the notion that because it's always been that way means that it is okay and that it should be that way is also not correct. Which is why I'm really glad that we have this master plan update coming that will actually assess the appropriateness of that zoning and what it really truly should be to be appropriate for the east side and the west side that borders this property. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Nicole Solt.
Hi, my name's Nicole Soul, and I'm located at 2610 North, 2200 West. I'm actually the first house that you come into. So, this is where I live. This is what I see every day.
We need the comments to be in the microphone to be on the record.
It's all open space. That property should never have been zoned commercial. It's completely wetlands. And right now, all the environmental testing is probably completely wrong because it's during a drought. So once we finally, hopefully we come out of this drought soon, that area is even going to be much more of a wetland. I agree with one of the gentlemen. Where do these wildlife go? You should see right now the cranes that are coming out through their migration. When this was originally zoned commercial, it was zoned as a huge lot altogether. When they zoned it, I'm assuming that they had tried to put some of the residents into consideration because they also allowed for a large open space. And for that area, 2200 West, it is too small. You need to go out there. It's a country road. I'm hearing a lot of long-term and intentions from the builders. And intentions are just, I mean, I've intended to do a lot to my yard and it hasn't been completed. So to me, I feel like there's a lot of promises right now, but I don't think it's putting the residents into consideration. I don't think it's putting the wildlife in consideration. And I mean, this is actually the last agricultural neighborhood in Salt Lake City. It is a gem.
That's time. Thank you so much, Ms. Solt. All right, Terry Maresco, you're up.
Hi, excuse me, my name is Terry Maresco, and I live in Salt Lake, not in the property. I'd just like to address all of the concerns I certainly agree with, but let me talk about intent. The intent is to build this road just as if I went to the top of this building and intend to jump off it and live. This is all speculative, and let me tell you about a presentation that this developer did to the community a couple of nights ago about air quality, which is my expertise. They showed some statistics, the Wasatch Regional Front projected for the area, put their projections in the middle, and then put the difference. Now, communities that aren't familiar with air quality issues, you look at the middle column, all the inputs were sort of brushed over, and let's look at the difference. We're putting less cars, but yet we're putting thousands of tons of NOx and SOx. So my comment is, what you're seeing from the developer, in this case presented to the community, is highly questionable. Whatever they put in front of you needs to be looked at again and again. The intent of building the road, they may never get approval, and they get to build a project and run these people into the ground with dust, NOx, and SOx. You all know that the west side is the most polluted urban area in the state, sorry. The largest open pit mine in the world, 5 oil refineries. So as you look at this, I know it's a planning thing and it's a subdivision, but you have to take this to the 30-foot level. It's the whole city that matters, not just a little piece of property. But I would question anything the developer put in front of you, which to me, in this presentation to the community, suggests that they don't intend to show the true picture, particularly on the air quality inputs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no further cards on this topic. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please come up to the microphone and state your name. If there's anyone in the overflow room, you might want to make your way across the hall at this time as well.
Hi, my name is Alma Mendoza, and I'm at 2240 West, 3130 North. I'm in a little small street. And when I come out of that street onto 2200 West, I already got rear-ended, okay? So the cars are coming down really fast, even at 65 miles per hour. And so it's a little roundabout, kind of, it's like a little turn. And so had that problem. My left mirror on my truck already touched another vehicle, and I was in my lane. This is while this construction was beginning down at 2200 West by 2100 North. Then my neighbor across the street, so we take walks and stuff, she already got hit by a car. And that was Rashawn, so I don't know if you guys know about that. So now I don't want to take any walks because the street is very narrow. So I got me a treadmill. So I'm just now working out of my garage for the walk. And so But you can hear when FedEx is coming, you can hear a UPS, you can hear a semi. It'll jolt the house. The house is kind of already cracking, you know, because there's vehicles, semis coming through that are over 5 tons, which I thought they weren't allowed, okay? So, and there's been a lot of deer killed. There's accidents that continuously happen on 2100 North and 2200 West. It's already hard to get out of there. For sure, I don't have a problem with my neighbor, you know what I'm saying? He wants to sell his place and this and that. He is my neighbor. And they will be building alongside of one of our parcels. But the only problem that I do have is just the traffic. The city comes out frequently to cover the potholes. And again, they just open up and they have to come out and do it again.
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Anyone else that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Okay.
My name is Joe McAllister. I'm the general counsel for Hughes General Contractors. We recently purchased the 15 acres at 2596 North, 2200 West, which is directly across the street from the southeast corner of this project. And I just wanted to stand up. I just intended to listen, but I wanted to stand up and just point out to this group, everybody here, that when we bought this property, we looked at the ways to facilitate a safer access to the street, to improve the street. And the reality is that it takes money. And that money right now, it seems to be required by development. There is a lot that needs to be done, and we are willing to work with any of the property owners in the area and invest significant resources into improving this street, to making it safer. But everybody has to agree to do that, and to agree for some finality to all of the property owners in the area, so that instead of everyone sitting back in their bunkers waiting to throw a grenade into the one next door, we can move forward with a plan that's safe and that respects the rights of all of the owners, the ones that have been there and the ones that will be there in the future. And so rather than using street safety as a weapon to prevent improvements to the adjoining private property, let's invest the money that it takes to improve the street and allow the private property rights to work themselves out for the highest and best uses in the area. That's what we would like to do. We support this project. We think it makes good sense, and we think it keeps, the option, and is really the only viable option of making 2200 West safer. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments person that wishes to make comments? Okay.
Madam Chair, we did get a couple emails.
Oh, you did?
Yes, so we do still have on the agenda the ability to let people to email if they'd like to.
Thank you.
Despite the fact that we aren't necessarily having
Yeah, please read those into the
hybrid meeting.
record.
So the first one is from Cindy Cromer. She says, "It is not likely that you will see another subdivision this large during your years of service on the commission. The challenge of a project of this scale has been met by Daniel Echeverria. The complexity of a proposal such as this one is where Daniel excels. The public comments include ones from advocates for avian wildlife. The credentials of these authors are impeccable, including authors of books and lifetimes of experience. I've known some of them for almost 40 years. Finally, the commission has the authority to initiate petitions. You choose not to do so, but you need to. Bird strikes or the collision of birds and buildings result in the deaths of millions of birds each year. The building you are in tonight is guilty, but not as responsible for killing birds as the public safety building and the main library. These unnecessary deaths could be mitigated through the conditional use process if you added a condition regarding protection of existing natural resources to the requirements for sustainability. Of course, you would also have to require the applicant meet more than one measly requirement in seeking approval. Addressing the mitigation of losses to natural resources would give you an opportunity to strengthen the requirements, which are currently far too lenient to deliver worthy projects to the city's built environment." And the second one says, "Dear Planning Commission, my name is Stephen Kaiser of Kingrows LLC. Kingrows holds a 60-year lease with option to buy the 15-acre property abutting the Swader subdivision. Our lease property is located directly south and abutting the south property boundary of the proposed Swanner subdivision at 2601 North, 2200 West. We have read the proposed Swanner subdivision application and all supporting documents and planning comments. We support the subdivision application as proposed by Swanner and feel it will provide a very positive benefit to Salt Lake City and the surrounding community. Regards, Stephen Kaiser.
That's it. Okay, with that, I will close the public comment period. And we have another applicant. What's your name?
Patrick Marka with Scannell
Okay.
Properties.
Okay. If you want to take a few moments to address any of the questions or concerns that came up, this is your time to do that.
You know, I'll first address Jack's comment with regards to 3200 West and vacating it or closing the road. We certainly support that. On our initial plan, you know, we had that as an approved road. After further analysis of our project and really creating the right amount of flow and all the requirements to be met from fire and safety, we do not have any reason to improve 3200 West. So it would be our proposal, obviously, to also to vacate 3200 West. Even the roads that were planned to go into 3200 West, we would develop cul-de-sacs with the intent or the purpose of, again, trying to keep all truck traffic and auto as much to the inside of the project, the interior of the development as possible. That brings me into 2200 West. I have listened to the public tonight and everybody's stories, and we are certainly empathetic to your concerns. We've had several conversations with the community council as of late of Thursday, and we are aware of the challenges of 2200 West. What I've heard this evening is the current challenges and what exists on 2200 West and have for some time, and the stories that back that tonight. What we're proposing and we're funding, which I think is an important thing to consider, is a bypass road that goes through our site. In addition, we're going above and beyond to fund the bypass road to connect into 2100 North. So if you compare that to the prior plan was to have the bypass road go through the Swanner project, the subject project, and tie into 2200 West. So it really didn't mitigate or does not mitigate 2200 West traffic. If anything, it would add traffic to 2200 West. What we have proposed on the screen is our mitigation efforts to take 2200 West traffic down, whereas that bypass road coming off of 2100 North going north to the site would actually be the primary access road, ingress and egress, and have truck traffic and auto traffic going into the site. Now, we always like to be transparent and set expectations, as you should, in that it will take some time. As Dan alluded to, the plan is to have the construction road constructed by the time we're probably finished civil. So while there will be some added traffic, construction traffic to 2200 West initially, it will be limited. It will be limited to probably a 12 to 16 week period where you're going to have construction traffic. And I don't know that's avoidable. But by the time we deliver building 2 and 3, not barring any challenges that would prolong it, is to have the bypass road completed into our site. And so it is a solution, and I think, as Joe just said, it's really the only viable solution to take traffic off of 2200 West. And Scannell, as the developer, is willing to fund that, as well as put in the road it's a public use road all the way through it. And so I can't change what's currently going on in 2200 West, but I think it's a really good solution for which we've proposed is to drop it down and incur additional cost to tie it into 2100 North versus the original plan was to tie it in back into 2200 West. So it would have jogged to the east and just south of our buildings, tie it into 2200 West. So that would not have really fixed the challenge that everybody is witnessing right now. So again, empathetic to the situation. I understand it. I've driven that road several times in the past couple of years. But our solution, I think, is a very viable one. And it will take, probably 6 to 8 months, but it will provide that solution. And it'll take 2200 West traffic down from what it is now. because even trucks that aren't coming into our development in cars will eventually take the bypass road through, because a semi is going to always take the path of least resistance and not go down a country road. So we do think it's a very viable solution which we've proposed to fund, and it's not even a requirement.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll bring it back to the commissioners now for discussion, and if you have any other questions for staff, now's the time.
This is Amy Burrows. A couple things that I'm thinking about is that if the master plan right now, the idea is to limit traffic and traffic cuts onto 2200 West, it seems like we have to, the best way to do that is to give the block size modification so that that many roads don't have to be built onto 2200 West. I think I understand that correctly. And then the other thing that sticks in my mind is that we can't require these property owners to do something on land that they don't own. So we can't say, as a condition of getting a block size modification that you want, you have to build this road first, because they don't own that property. Is that right, Daniel? That's what it felt like that you were saying, that we can't require them to build a road on a property they don't have.
That's correct.
So if we want them to, we can't add that as a condition of doing something else that we want to, which is limiting the traffic and the curb cuts onto 2200 West. So those are a couple of things that I think about.
Okay. Adrian.
Daniel, can you please talk about the improvements required to 2200 West that are in your staff report?
Can you speak more to the microphone?
Did everyone hear me?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
Say it
can you
again.
please describe the improvements to 2200 West that are described in the staff report?
Let me pull up a slide. So this will give you maybe a better understanding of what the requirements are. There's There's a photo here of 2200 West. So you can see the existing 2200 West is really this light colored asphalt. And there is a property actually just to the south of the Swanner site that's actually done the improvements that Swanner would actually be required to do. So you can see what those improvements are. It's 36 feet of additional asphalt on the west side of 2200 West, so it widens that out significantly. So you actually have enough room for 2 lanes and then a center turn lane, and then there's also a shoulder as well. In addition to that, they would be running the utility lines through there as well underneath the pavement. But those are the improvements that they're going to have to be doing.
And what about sidewalks?
Sidewalks also required on their side of the property.
And we can't require them on the other side of the property because?
But
within the right-of-way? I mean, within the city right-of-way?
Generally, improvements have to be done on the side of the property that is immediately abutting the developer's property. And residents have actually expressed concerns about doing any improvements on the east side of the roadway. There are some property lines that may encroach into what is functioned as a right-of-way.
So it's not clean?
It's not clean.
Okay. And then in terms of improvements to the existing condition of the road along the stretch of the road from their main access point to the south, are they required to repair potholes, repair damage caused by construction traffic?
They would be. And on top of that, engineering has requirements for a construction plan so the developer's going to have to provide an actual plan for where their trucks are going to travel, their construction trucks travel. They're going to have to mitigate any damage and provide a plan for how to avoid any damage to the existing roadway. So that would be a requirement when they actually proceed with construction.
Their plans. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are my questions.
What
Thank
is
you.
the timing expected on the widening of 2200 West in relationship to the commencement of building 1 and 2?
So as far as city requirements, certificates of occupancy for buildings couldn't be issued until that roadway that provides access has actually been widened and completed. They could, though, commence construction activities for buildings on the site.
And do we have any legal purview in that timing?
Subdivision standards don't speak to that timing.
Okay. I will let the public know that is often a frustration of mine and other commissioners, that we get limited very much by the things that we hear, that we understand, because we live in the city too. So I think we all understand those things, that we don't always have the legal purview to address a lot of those things that come up, such as in this case, when does this road get widened in relationship to then construction traffic? Does the city require, because this initially will be a more narrow road, does the city require construction flagging and, one on site to try to manage traffic size, like if they're having a big semi, to manage safety in that road?
Engineering has requirements for what that access point has to be on the
Engineering
property. Yeah, and you see some examples out here. They have like a WAS station required at one central control point, so that the vehicles are washed of any debris before they enter city roadways. But
I was just thinking if prior to this road being widened, in any construction traffic, if engineering would require like additional construction crews to direct traffic, or stop one way for another for the semi to come through, so you don't have those conflicts of running one off the road or another. But I don't know what engineering requires for those things.
it's going to depend on the scope. If they're limiting like the actual usable area of that roadway, they can certainly require things like that, so that there's not like a traffic conflict.
All right, commissioners, any other discussions or questions? I would, again, remind you, if we could please first handle the motion specifically for the block size modification.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I don't have a problem with block size modification, and I want to tell people that I actually did go out to the site today, and I drove both 2200 West and 3200 West, and I feel like many of you that every time I see a sign on a natural site that says "coming soon" improvements, I get a little skip in my heart too. On the other hand, I'm going to agree with Mr. McAllister, who said, I believe, that we really should have a plan, so we're not all throwing rocks at each other. And hopefully that plan is what North Point is working on right now. The city is working on that plan right now. Unfortunately, we cannot hold up this project while that plan is being completed. But I urge everyone who is interested in this to participate in that plan to the extent possible. And I will make a motion unless somebody else has something to say.
Let me say real quick, whose court is the ball in as far as closing 3200 West?
Daniel? Nick?
It's somewhat in the city's hands.
Well, it's yeah. So it's complicated because you heard from one of the in the public comment.
You speak closer into your mic,
A
Nick.
statement that was true is that the city boundary is basically the midpoint of that street. So east half is in Salt Lake City, west half is Salt Lake County, and so we can only the city. Could potentially close that street or vacate, and the difference is closing means that we may be closing it for general transportation purposes, but it may remain open for some things, for example, access to properties and things like that. Vacate means we're vacating all interest in the property.
Will you speak more into your microphone?
And, sorry, so the city council, that's ultimately a city council decision. And to do that, one of the things, and it's in the staff report that we have to consider, is that and this is something that hopefully will maybe address with that North Point plan update, is that 3200 West is identified on the city's major street plan, which means prior or part of vacating or closing it means taking it off of that major street plan. And so the concept that we've been talking about is replacing this bypass road that's been talked about on the major street plan, adding that to the major street plan and removing 3200 West. That way, we don't necessarily need to require improvements on 3200 West when adjacent properties develop, things like that. Or the city council can then choose to more easily close or vacate it.
I have one other question for you, Nick. Actually, it's about, there were some folks who wanted to consolidate the open space within this project rather than having it be on each lot. And I know that that's not what the zoning requires. It requires each lot to have a specific amount of open space. What do we have to do to change that?
Couldn't they do a planned development?
They could, so somebody could do a planned development to do that. I think that there might be some administrative remedies through, the state code does authorize administrative development agreements, where if we think that the actual code is still being met, that we can enter into an agreement with a property owner to do that. We'd have to look into the legalities of that to make sure. If that's not an option and the plan development isn't an option, then it would be a change, a code change basically to authorize that in the future.
Right, a code change for the BP zone.
Correct.
Essentially. Right. Which, how much BP zone is there left in the city? A lot?
Outside of, so last time I looked, and I think that we've had some BP zones changed. It used to be mapped somewhat on North Temple, or on Redwood, no, North Temple west of Redwood. I think that we, if memory serves, we have around between 800 and 900 acres total in the city. This is 50% of that. The next biggest piece is actually the O.C. Tanner property on State Street. So there's small little pieces here and there.
And that, I can't remember what it's called now, the part that goes through that's a open space, whose decision is that to make the change that allows them to divert that or to change it? Is that
Canal?
The
I
canal?
think the canal.
The
yes.
canal. Ultimately, that's up to the city through public utilities, because public utilities is the entity that has that deed restriction, or is in favor of that deed restriction. And so they would ultimately be the deciders there. And just so the Planning Commission and everyone in the room is aware, we have had developments that have relocated canals before, done similarly things where they've cut through the middle of properties to make them more conducive to development. And so it is something that has happened, and just putting that out there so people know.
Thank you. Motion?
Anything else, or a motion for the lot modifications?
Am I correct in that this is a recommendation to the mayor?
Yes, it is.
That is not the way it is written?
It's the second motion. Yeah, scroll down to the second motion for the block size modification.
I'm sorry. Which do they both have to be made?
Yes, we're gonna end up making two, but if you go to
So we are approving the preliminary subdivision request, and we can do that.
No, let's first please do the block size modification request motions, which
Thank you.
is located
Okay.
further down on the page.
Based on the analysis and findings listed in the staff report, information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission send a positive recommendation to the mayor for the block-sized modifications as requested as part of the preliminary subdivision PLN SUB 2021-00740.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the block size modification from Brenda and a second from Adrian. Let's go ahead and take a vote on that. Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. And if we are ready, I will take a motion on the subdivision creation, I guess. Just, yeah. Or if you need to have some more discussion on that next time.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Based on the analysis and findings listed in the staff report, information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move the Planning Commission approve the preliminary subdivision request PLN SUB 2021-00740 for the Swanner subdivision located at approximately 2691 North, 2200 West, with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion from Maureen on a subdivision approval and a second from Brenda. Let's go ahead and take a vote on that. John?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
And Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously as well. We're going to take a 5-minute break because we have 2 more items, but I need to take a break.
Madam Chair, can I just real quickly, for those, particularly those people who live on 2200 West, if you haven't already given us your contact information to participate in the North Point plan, please reach out to us and let us, so we can make sure we include you and address, so your voices can be incorporated into that plan. Thank you.
Okay, we will reconvene at 7:45. call this meeting back into session. And we're all here. Okay, so our next agenda item is number 6, the zoning map amendment at approximately 805 South, 800 West. This is case number PLN PCM 2021-01077. And our planner tonight is Brooke.
Good evening. It's good to be with you all in person. So this is a request to rezone the property at 805 South, 800 West from M1 light manufacturing to RMU 45 residential mixed use. The property is approximately 0.11 acres, and the intent of the rezone is to allow the property owner to accommodate a multifamily development or an attached single-family development on the property. And staff is recommending the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. So just to give you some background information, the parcel is currently vacant and is located on the corner of 800 South, 800 West. It's approximately 760 feet west of I-15, and it is surrounded by a variety of zoning districts and land uses. The properties on the surrounding block are zoned M1, and they are predominantly light commercial and light industrial, with the exception of 4 single-family dwellings that are located at the southwest corner of the block. The standards for zoning map amendments can be found in Chapter 21A 50050, and I would like to just touch on some of the main considerations. The first is the master plan policies. The property is located in the West Side Master Plan area, and the subject site is along the 800 South and 700 West Industrial Corridor, which is identified as an important gateway into the West Side community neighborhood. This corridor is principally composed of industrial uses abutting single-family homes. The plan identifies several goals to increase the community's residential density and mixed-use infill on vacant parcels in the 700 West corridor. The site is also located within 0.2 miles of the 900 West 800 South intersection, which has been identified as a community node, and it contains a grocery store and other commercial uses that draws in community members from the surrounding area. The plan does identify the need for additional residential density within and around this node as well. So the change in the zoning would provide an infill development opportunity as supported in the master plan. The zoning map amendment implements neighborhoods growth and the housing initiatives stated in Plan Salt Lake as well. Next is some compatibility considerations with the adjacent properties, and there have been several that were identified with an analysis of the project. First, I'd like to touch on is the development characteristics of the area. Along 800 South, the development is predominantly reflective of the current M1 zoning. So these are larger to moderate-sized parcels that contain 2-story commercial and warehouse buildings and a hard surface paving. They have minimal setbacks and minimal landscaping. Welfare Square is located directly north, and it contains an 178-foot tall grain elevator. It's also located in the M1 zone. Further west, down 800 South, is RMU 35 zoning, which contains small-scale residential uses. The development pattern along 800 West is predominantly small-scale residential. The east side is zoned M1, and the west side is zoned RMU 35 and R1 5000. Genesee Avenue also contains a mix of uses. The western half of the block is zoned M1, and it contains small-scale residential uses. And the eastern half of the block was rezoned to RMU in 2020 to allow for a large-scale mixed-use development. And there have been several building permits issued for the development of this property. It's also important to note the public comments received. Staff received 2 email comments in support and 2 in opposition. Those in opposition have expressed concerns regarding the development density allowed under the RMU 45 zoning district and would like a lower density residential zone. As mentioned, there is a single family dwelling to the south, which is zoned M1. And there are also single family parcels to the west and northwest across the intersection and 800 West, which are zoned RMU 35. The parcels on the block, however, are all zoned M1, as I mentioned, which does allow for more intensive uses and development standards and patterns. Staff also considered a zoning comparison between the proposed RMU 45 standards and the M1 standards. So there's not a minimum lot area requirement in the RMU 45 zone or the M1 for this parcel in particular because it is an existing legal parcel. The RMU 45 zone allows for a 45-foot height, and the M1 zone allows for a 65-foot height. The RMU 45 zone requires a 30-foot rear yard setback and 20% open space, which is typical for residential zones. And the M1 zone does not require rear yard or open space. RMU 45 requires a front and corner side yard setback of a minimum of 5 feet and a maximum of 10 feet, where the M1 requires 15 feet for the front and corner side yards. And then there is no interior side yard setback required for either zones, which is typical for the mixed use and commercial zoning districts, and is also consistent with the predominant development pattern of the block. So overall, the proposed RMU 45 zones do increase the compatibility with the residential uses on the block. Finally, building height. We analyzed the context of the building height allowed in the area. So under the RMU zone, zoning requirements, which is located to the south, does allow for a 75-foot building height. The RMU 35 zone to the west allows for 35 feet. The R1 5000 zone to the west allows for a 28-foot height. And the existing zoning of the block, as mentioned, allows for a 65-foot height. The tallest building in the neighborhood is 178 feet, located directly north. And the applicant did provide a shadow study, which showed a conceptual 45-foot tall building massing, and it indicated that the single-family dwelling directly south will not be impacted by the shadow of the conceptual building. So it is staff's opinion that the development standards of the RMU 45 zoning district are compatible with the intensity of the adjacent uses on the surrounding property, as well as the development potential of the area, and also align with the development goals of the West Side Master Plan. Therefore, based on the information in the staff report, planning staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed zoning map amendment at 805 South, 800 West. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time. The applicant is also here.
How many units would be, given the size of this parcel, which is 4,300 square feet? Mm-hmm. How many units would be allowed under the zoning for RMU 45?
So it doesn't require a minimum for the square footage requirements. So it really depends on how the applicant lays out the parcel in this case.
Here that that each unit requires 2,500 square feet. That's what it says on your zoning thing.
I can pull up my stuff.
Maybe I'm reading this incorrectly.
No, you're reading it correctly for like townhome projects or multifamily. If you scroll down at the bottom, it also says that if they're rear-loaded units, that there is no lot size requirement.
Rear loading?
Yeah, so example, if you have a garage, it's not coming from the garage isn't on the street, that the parking is in the back. So the building is rear-loaded, not rear-loaded.
It's going to take up 400 square feet just to have a parking space there.
Yeah, I think the applicant would probably be able to describe their development plans better as well. It is a small parcel.
And was there any reason why you chose RMU 45 instead of RMU 35?
That was what the applicant requested, so they could probably answer that question better.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thanks, Brooke. And we have Jake Billeteri and Jordan Atkin.
Hello, I'm Jordan Atkin. I'm the applicant. So to answer your question, Brenda, we came in with a different zone. We were proposing FPUN2, and after discussion with staff, found that the RMU 45 was likely more compatible, given that it was directly to the west. We chose 45 over the 35. Just kind of creating a hierarchy as you get closer to the freeway and the development potential that's likely to occur as you come off of that, and the precedents from the west end kind of to the south of us. Overall, after we've looked at it more, I think we're fine going to RMF 35. We've explored different things, and we just don't think we can meet the requirements of the code to do anything more than possibly 4 units.
Did you have further, like a formal presentation?
I don't have
Okay.
anything formal. I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay. Commissioners, did you want to follow up on that? I will say that I'm
confused too, because it clearly says that you need, for a multifamily, for single family attached, that's townhouses, 2,500 per unit. For a single family detached, 2,500. For twin home, it's 2,500. For non-residential uses, no minimum, and it doesn't even say anything about multifamily.
Yeah.
So and how can you build? You can't build an elevator building on a 4,000 square foot piece of land with 15-foot, 10-foot setbacks in the front, and the setbacks you got here. And 25% of the lot depth. I mean, we're talking, in the end, a very small piece of land.
This is what the RMU 45 zone says.
Will you speak into your microphone, Warnick?
This is what the RMU 45 zone says for multifamily dwellings. 5,000 square feet for new lots. So there's no minimum unit requirement for lot area. No minimum for existing lots. So there's no minimum lot size for multifamily if it's an existing lot. So basically we rely on what the bulk that is allowed in the zone to determine that, and whether somebody can design something that fits and meets all the standards.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about how this block then ultimately kind of redevelops, in that the height seems more appropriate closer to the freeway in relationship to the RMU zone that is on the corner of 9th West. I think 9th West, when that was rezoned, operates much differently than 8th West, but that I'm not convinced that the RMU 45 is the right zone for this portion of that block, that as this moves forward in its redevelopment, that it comes down and kind of matches what's happening all around it across the street, which we have, R1 5000 and RMU 35. And so that's kind of philosophically like how I think about when we approach these areas of what we want to redevelop, because realistically the M1 will go away for the rest of the block at some point. Maybe not in my tenure here or my lifetime, but it will. And so how, I guess, I want to just kind of hear your thoughts of because you mentioned the hierarchy, and I don't know that I'm necessarily convinced that that hierarchy should start at that side, that it should be more towards the freeway side. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we really spent a lot of time looking at the West End project that was, what is that, on 9th South coming right off the freeway, and looked at kind of what they were saying, and they're going to be able to build 75 feet by right, 125 feet conditional. So we thought that it was definitely possible that we could see other applications put forward for some of the larger lots, but east of us on our block phase as you approach the freeway, creating a hierarchy from the freeway. We certainly understand we're not part of the node at 9th West, and again, we would be happy to concede to the 35. I don't think I think that's all we'll end up doing anyway.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, hang tight. We'll go ahead and officially open the public comment period. Is there anyone here that wishes to make a comment? I'm assuming the overflow room is now empty. Okay. So,
They all went home.
I don't see any hands raised, so I'll officially close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for a discussion about kind of what we just talked about, and then a motion.
Well, I would be happy to move that we recommend a rezone of RMF 35, and if that's reasonable with everyone, then I will make that motion.
So, question, Nick, if since the applicant has indicated that they're okay with that, we would just basically make our own motion from scratch to say we would approve that it be rezoned to RMU 35?
Yeah, I think I would make sure that, I know the applicant just said that, but I would want the applicant to be more decisive or more explicit about saying that they would be okay with a recommendation about the RMU 35.
So procedurally, should we table the motion and allow the applicant to bring back a revised proposal?
No, I don't think you need to do that because you're within the purview of what the ask is.
Yes.
I think if you're going above it, it would be different. But going below, I think you're probably okay there. But because this is a private application and the application was for RMU 45, I think we should ask the applicant if they are okay with a motion that is a different zone.
And it is a motion to recommend to the city council, so we're not deciding the ultimate deciders on this. But yes, are you clear what a development for an RMU 35 would entail for this lot? And you feel like you can move forward with that, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, if I need to read a statement, I'm happy to. But yeah, we're fully on board with RMU 35.
Okay, is that clear enough, Nick? Explicit enough for you?
Yep.
Okay, so we are making a recommendation to the city council, and that would be, if you want to make that motion, Brenda, go ahead.
Okay.
You're taking all the hard ones tonight. Go.
Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation for an RMF 35.
Oh, and wait, isn't it RMU?
RMU.
I'm sorry. RMU 35 zoning change on the parcel that was a part of PLN PCM 2021-01077.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on a recommended from Brenda and a second from Adrian. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Maureen?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And Adrian?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Just for transparency reasons,
Yes.
when we transmit this, the transmittal will still say the RMU 45, but the motion from the
RMU?
Planning Commission was for RMU 35.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows that. That way, ultimately, the city council's the decider, and they can still consider the original ask.
But is that an issue with a public hearing for the city council?
That's why I want to say that. So when we write the
Yes.
notice,
Okay.
it will give the council the option.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have our last item tonight. It's the R2 lot coverage zoning text amendment. This is PLN PCM 2021-01228. The planner was Megan Booth, but tonight we are hearing from Wayne Mills.
You know, it's a little odd to be on this side of the table. It's kind of scary. All right, let me get...
Everybody says that about me.
Let me find my presentation here. Megan would do this a lot faster.
You're officially the slowest one tonight. Just wanted to make sure you knew that.
That really shouldn't surprise anybody.
You'll have 2 minutes to open your presentation.
Time is ticking. Time is ticking.
All right. I think we're there. There we go. Look at that. All right. So this is a zoning text amendment that is privately generated, and it's to amend the text for building coverage in the R2 zoning district. And the ask by the petitioner is to increase the allowable building coverage to 45% for single-family homes that are located on lots that are less than the current minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. I'll go into a little bit more detail of what all that means here in a minute. Just a little bit of an explanation. The current building coverage regulations for, well, I'll explain the R2 zoning district. The R2 zoning district is a single and two-family zoning district, so it predominantly, pardon me, allows single and two-family development. The current building coverage allowance for duplexes is 45%, and the allowable building coverage for single-family homes is 40%, and regardless of the lot size. So just to kind of go into our recommendation a little bit, we've provided a bit of a recommendation menu for you. We analyzed the applicant's proposal and believe that the applicant's proposal meets the standards of review for a zoning text amendment, and recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval on that. But we also took it one step further and analyzed allowing 45% building coverage across the board for all single-family homes, not just those located on lots less than 5,000 square feet. Staff feels like that this actually simplifies the code, provides one standard for all development in the R2 zone. And so we provided a motion that if the Planning Commission so desires, if they want to take it that next step further, there's a motion there to do it. So I'll go into what some of this stuff means just a little bit. This is all explained in the staff report. But building coverage is the amount or the percentage of the lot that can be covered by principal and accessory buildings on that particular lot. And it's really to ensure that there's some open space on the property for, landscaping, outdoor uses. I do want to jump in really quick and say that this proposal does not affect or impact any of the other zoning regulations such as setbacks, building height, any of that. All that would remain in place. So even though somebody could get a little bit larger structure, it would still have to meet all the other zoning requirements. Expand a little bit on the current building coverage regulations. Like I said before, right now, single-family dwellings are only allowed 40% of lot coverage. Duplexes are allowed 45% of the lot. Pardon me. To kind of expand a little bit on this lot size thing, what that basically says is that if you create a new lot in the R2 zoning district and you want to create a new lot for single-family development, that minimum lot size has to be 5,000 square feet. If you're to build a duplex, you need 8,000 square feet. So back to the single-family stuff, we have a lot of properties in the city that do not meet those minimum lot size requirements. That's because they were basically developed before these current zoning regulations are in place. That's the case with the applicant's property. It's actually under that 5,000 square feet. So because it's a smaller lot size, if you limit it to 40%, you're getting a much smaller structure. Just a little bit about the difference between 40 and 45%. We'll take like an example of a 400 or 4,000 square foot lot. You can see in the table here that if we increased it from 40% to 45%, it's a fairly minimal change. You get about 200 square feet of additional space in the home. And again, all the setback requirements, building height, all that stuff would be applicable. Just to provide a little context of where what areas of the city this would impact. This is a map of the R2 zones in the city, spread out a little bit throughout the city, but mainly concentrated in the Central City and Capitol Hill neighborhoods. The applicant's proposal, which would affect lots that are under 5,000 square feet, you can see that impact here. Fairly minimal impact or on the number of lots that would be affected or would be allowed that extra size. Excuse me. And then with staff's kind of additional recommendation, it does expand that a little bit. Basically what this shows is the lots that are currently single family in the R2 zoning district. Now, this map doesn't necessarily say that every one of these properties is going to expand. There may be a number of these properties where they already exceed the 40% or 45% because, again, they were developed prior to our current regulations. So staff findings. The staff feels that the proposed text amendment is aligned with the initiatives outlined in the city plans, and also the text amendment generally complies with the standards for a text amendment. And once again on that recommendation, the applicant's proposal is to allow 45% building coverage for single family on lots less than 5,000 square feet. The additional recommendation, taking it that next step further, is to allow 45% building coverage for all single-family development in the R2 district, not just limited to lot size. And again, simplifies the code, does a one regulation kind of deal. And that's all I have. If you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, Wayne, and when you solicited public information on the public input to this proposal, did this second part, was the staff recommendation to expand it part of that public notice?
That was not originally part of that. It was just advertised as an expansion or an additional allowance in the R2 zone, and then we explained the applicant's proposal. The way that we saw this is, when we do go out for the initial, kind of the initial notification, we'll often send out the applicant's proposal. And then as we go through and do further analysis, that may be adjusted a little bit, and then we notify, the additional notification comes through the Planning Commission public hearing.
We do have a public comment in the Dropbox that is specific to this expanded proposal.
That's correct.
That what?
That actually does talk about this expanded proposal.
Okay.
So we did get one public comment, and it does address that additional component that staff is recommending beyond what the applicant is.
I don't have it. Oh, here it is.
I do want to point out that the applicant is here tonight.
Yes. John?
I was just going to mention that one comment came in later this afternoon, so it's probably about 4 o'clock, so you might have missed it earlier.
I actually just read it while you were talking. Sorry, Mike. Any other questions for staff? Okay, we have the applicant here, is Jim Bradley. If you want to come up and... state your name for the record, and then if you want to make any comments, and then we'll open it up for questions from commissioners to you. Well, just wait till you can talk into the microphone so it's on the record.
Jim Bradley, representing the Bradley family. My son, Nick Bradley, back here actually is the resident and part owner of the home, too. It's an old historic home that needs to be kept as it is, and the limitations under the existing ordinance don't allow it to be that. And I think Mr. Mills has done an excellent job in terms of establishing the issue and the solution. Now, he also recommended something I didn't. He added on, and that is to include all homes in the R2, which I believe would be very appropriate. So anyway, I have nothing to say. I won't press my luck, I hope.
Always a good advice. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm going to officially open the public comment period. Any other emails that may have come in, John? Then I will officially close the public comment period and bring it back to the commissioners. I found the staff report to be really, had a lot of really great things to help direct the kind of process of evaluating this for me. And the additional request from staff to expand this. I think that personally, looking at the square footage that could be added by expanding this to 45% seems absolutely something we would want to be promoting. Because if somebody is looking just to add on to their existing home, this would allow them to do that. And I think it's one of those things. I think code sometimes just is so old that we don't necessarily know how it's playing out in the needs we have today. And I am also glad that staff took it upon themselves to expand this notion of, like, would this be appropriate in other areas? So my thoughts on that are there. Wayne.
Commissioner Scheer, I do want to point out that, just to kind of go back a little bit on your question, when we advertised this on the agenda, we did keep that language more open. And so when we did the ad, or when we did the notification for the public hearing, we basically just advertised it as expanding the building coverage in the R2 district. So we wanted to make sure that that notice that went out wasn't so specific that people didn't just think, oh, it was just the lots under 5,000 square feet.
And I will also remind the commission that we're making a recommendation to the city council, so there will be a further opportunity for public participation in their process. So that would not preclude anybody else who wanted to participate at that point as well.
Madam Chair, can I make a follow-up comment? So I've opened up the open house information sheet, which is what starts at 45, which is used for the early engagement period. And this is what it defines the request has. This is a zoning text amendment to section 21A 24110.f to increase the surface coverage from 40% to 45% for single family and two family dwellings in the R2 zone. And that's all it says. So it doesn't differentiate.
The lot size.
I just was concerned that we had properly noticed
It's a great point.
Because we, if it only affects a couple of neighborhoods, then, okay, maybe they want to come in and say something, but, okay.
So the public notice, the open house language did not differentiate the lot size. Okay.
Affects my neighborhood, so.
Okay,
I'm ready to make a motion.
Please, Adrian.
Based on the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission transmit a favorable recommendation to the City Council regarding petition PLN PCM 2021-01228, an amendment to Section 21A 24110F of the Salt Lake City zoning ordinance with the changes proposed by planning staff, which are found on page 3 of the Planning Commission staff report.
I'll second.
Yeah, I have a motion from Adrian and a second from Maureen. Let's take a vote. Amy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you both for sticking through the evening. This is not even close to our longest meeting lately, so
Well, thank you for your
thank you for that. I appreciate it. With that, we will adjourn our meeting tonight.